All right, everybody. Here we go again. This is the Amazombie. This is your SC2 Newscast weekly edit. This is Season 2, I believe, Episode 3. That's what I put on the banner, so hopefully that's right. We haven't been around much due to sickness and some other work-related issues going back and forth, but that's all right. It happens to the best of us. We do have a guest today, a guest who's been with us once before. I'm going to go ahead and bring her up here. Mary Ratliff from Good Game Movie. Filmmaker. Why don't we, well, we got intro, so Mary, why don't you just tell us a little about yourself, for anyone who doesn't know, a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay, Good Game is basically a feature-length documentary following the StarCraft 2 division of Team Evil Geniuses. We've been following them since, I think, March was when we first started shooting, and we're actually wrapping up now and starting to get into the post-production side of things, so.
All right, and we've had you on before. We talked a lot about the film and the filmmaking process and your history. You just got back from Korea, correct?
Yeah, I think I landed maybe the 23rd. It was actually one of those weird things where I, on paper, took off 5 hours before I landed because I was going across the date line and everything.
So it's like you're a time traveler.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was on the way there, it felt really terrible because I ended up almost not quite losing a day completely, but it felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the way back, it was just traveling back in time for 15 hours or however long I was on the plane. So, yeah, it was. We spent 2 weeks there. So
tell us just about Korea in general, your thoughts, how to go. How did you like it? Scenery? Did you see sights and all?
We did a little bit of sightseeing. I really loved it because I have only been out of the country once before, and that was to London, which was an amazing city. Like, you know, I'm not bashing London at all, but it's not quite like a foreign country experience. So this was my first time being in another place where English was not the language and not exactly, you know,
being in that lost in translation mode.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was, you know, and to be somewhere that was very different culturally was really great. I have been wanting to go to Japan for a really long time, and I have a lot of friends that have gone to Japan. And so it wasn't completely like I wasn't blown out of the water, like I have no idea what's going on here. But it was different. It was new. There were a lot of little things that took me by surprise. I did not expect to see 7-Eleven on every corner because 7-Eleven's kind of a chain that's sort of dying in America, but apparently it's huge in Asia, and I had no idea. But yeah, and the food was great. That was something that everybody had told me before I went, that, you know, like, you can't wait till you get there and try the food, and that was fantastic. We had to order by picture menu.
Yep.
The whole time, and there was actually a couple places that we went to that didn't have picture menus, so we were just kind of gesturing and ordering whatever was cheap and hoping that it was good. But what was really funny was Ken Ikeda was the cameraman that came with me, and he's actually Japanese, and so he speaks Japanese but not Korean, and we would go into these places and they would just assume that he was Korean and start speaking Korean at him, and he was like, no, I don't actually know what you're talking about. So, but we were kind of lucky because Seoul is actually a really popular vacation spot for Japanese tourists. So he was able to go onto a bunch of like Japanese touristy websites and find like restaurant recommendations for just these little random places that you would never even think to go to. So that was great, and he thankfully was really good at directions because I have no sense of direction. I get lost in my hometown, like it's really bad, and so he was really good at finding places. But yeah, it was fantastic. I really loved the city. Like, I can't wait for a chance to go back.
Yeah, no, I'm actually hoping to someday be able to get a chance to go. It seems quite entertaining. So you went there, of course, with the EG players that just went there, mainly Idra the Muslim. They are ending up staying in the Slayer's house, correct? So
Ben's not actually there at the moment. So the Muslim Well, he wasn't there when we were there. I guess I'll
Oh,
just
okay.
put it that way because I don't actually know where he is right now. So it was actually, Greg was pretty much the only person that, just timing-wise, that ended up being a little wacky. And then, of course, JYP was there. We
Hmm.
shot a little bit of him. But he was such a last-minute addition
Sure.
that it wasn't really, I didn't even have time to do research on.
What about Puma? Was he around?
He wasn't, actually,
Huh.
sadly. Which he's one of my favorite people. I hate that we missed him, but
So did you spend much time at like the Slayer's house or get to meet with any of the Slayer's guys while you were there?
a little bit. We went there to interview Greg, and so we got to see their training house. So, we got to go in and look around a little bit. We
Hmm.
didn't get to film it like we wanted to, for various and sundry complicated reasons. But we did get to go and talk to Greg and spend an hour or so there with him. So that was fun. It was a very long interview. It didn't feel that long, actually. At the end of it, I was like, all right, well, how much was that? And Ken said it had been an hour, and Greg and I both were like, really? Okay. So,
Um, so you mentioned you didn't get to see Puma while you did. Film-wise, as a whole, do you think that you got, now that you're in kind of the post-production state, do you feel like you got most of or all or of what you were hoping to get?
um, it's filmmakers are their own worst enemy. So
Sure.
you're very rarely going to find somebody that's going to be like, yes, everything's perfect. We did
Uh-huh.
everything we had to do. It was all fantastic. And we also have a tendency to kind of, shoot for 10 things so that we can achieve 5. So this was definitely a case where, we didn't get everything that we wanted. I wasn't as happy with it as I could have been. We got the main interviews that I wanted to get. So, we talked to Greg, we talked to Tasteless and Artosis, and we talked to Mr. Che. And we got a lot of great GSL footage. We got a lot of good B-roll of just Korea in general. And so, we came out with 7 hours of good footage, but at the same time, there were things that I wish we could have gotten, and I probably will always say that about everything.
Can you
But
give us a little bit of hint on what kind of things you were hoping for?
I really wanted to get more of the training houses
Hmm.
and what that looks like so that we could juxtapose it with the EG layer. The thing is that even when I don't get something myself that I want to get, I'm always coming up with contingency plans and other options and different ways to show that.
Sure.
So that's not like, I'm not saying, oh, well, there's not going to be anything about Korean training in the film because we didn't get it. Like, that's not true. If we need it, we'll find it. We'll get it somehow. So,
Sure, sure.
but
And I'm sure, especially having, hookups with some of the people, it shouldn't be too hard to at least get some footage or get some photos or interviews or whatnot.
yeah, exactly. And there's always Korean media, like their magazines and things like that. There's ways to do it. We haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do because at that point, we're making a plan for archival footage, and what we do with that is usually we wait until we know a little more specifically what we need. So we're not going out and just being like, let's gather everything that we can. We're sort of going to put together a rough cut and then say, what do we need? So we don't know exactly what we're doing with that yet. That'll come in the next month.
So, speaking of that, now that how is post-production going so far, and do we have any sort of timeline for like a rough cut into maybe like a final trailer into a release?
My editor actually has that schedule. It's like the one thing that I don't have written down that she does. But we do have our editing team put together. We have Bono Debris is editing it for me. She's done my last 2 films. She's really fantastic. And then we have an assistant editor who's come on, and he's actually a big StarCraft fan. So he's going to be working on it as well. And they have just gotten the footage over this weekend. We've been talking a lot about what we're going to be doing and sort of making our plans, but now they're actually getting into the nitty-gritty of, actually plugging things into Final Cut. So that's the exciting part. It is a very short post-production schedule that we have. It's actually extremely short considering how much footage and how much there is to go through. But we're kind of aiming for early fall for us being done. But the trick is that then that's the point where we start sending it out to festivals.
Sure.
And going through sort of our festival plan and our festival run and how that's going to work. So I don't necessarily have a specific, like, this is the day that DVDs will be in your hands if you want them. Yeah. But by the end of this year, the film should exist, which is kind of major for me. So.
Speaking of that, you talk about wanting to go into like a festival release or whatnot. Is that the next course of action after you have a final or near final cut, or do you have any kind of a distribution ideas for afterwards?
We have some ideas. Everything's kind of up in the air because most of it is things that I don't really have a lot of control over at the moment, because, you know, it's sort of like with festivals, you can sit and say, like, you know, everybody sort of says, like, I want to be in Sundance, we want to premiere at Sundance. So, yeah, that's a great dream to have, but they still have every likelihood of rejecting you. Yeah. As I've learned with one of my previous films. But so, yeah, there's a lot of plans, a lot of things that I want to do. We definitely want to do the festival run because the goal for the entire film from the beginning has been to reach a more general audience and to sort of reach out to the mainstream of people who don't know that this world exists and they don't know what it's like. And so we really want to be able to do that, and the best way to do that is actually to get into these festivals to get noticed. And just for people that are coming to the festival just to see films to say, oh, well, that one looks interesting, I'm going to buy a ticket for that. So that is a major part of the plan, is to make sure that we do our festival run and that we do it right. And then after that, I've got lots of ideas about how to distribute the film and to get it out to people. I mean, my main goal is that at the end of the day, like when everything is said and done, to have it available worldwide in multiple formats for a good price, so that as many people can watch it as want to. So.
Excellent. I'm going ahead and actually flipping through some of these photos right now that you sent us, some new images, some screenshots from the film.
Yep.
Anything about some of these photos that you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of the GSL studios and the stuff that we shot there. There's one of Greg looking particularly handsome in the booth. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, there we go. I think that one.
Yeah, and so that was one of my favorites, like I said, and it was nice to actually sort of start to see the how the show is shot. Mm-hmm. You know, when you watch GSL, obviously I have a very big interest in behind the scenes and the actual logistics of doing things. So it was neat to see little things like the fact that the camera that's on Tasteless and Artosis when they're casting, there's nobody at it. It's locked off. You know, and there's no reason for anybody to actually be standing there, but I'm so not used to seeing something like that.
Let me see if I can find that photo. There we go.
Yeah, it's just it surprises me that there's just nobody standing there. There's just a little camera, and you know, and like I said, there's no reason for anybody to be there. The shot doesn't actually change. And then they also have a really great the jib that they use for like the nice sweeping shots of the studio and everything like that. That thing was gorgeous. So it was a bit of like the film geek in me coming out. But yeah, and then finally I actually remembered to take a few pictures of my cameraman. So I have some pictures of Ken, which I need to take a few of Steve, who's actually been shooting all of our United States footage. Stephen Tringali has been our cinematographer. I've got to remember to take a few of him. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun to sort of get to take pictures, and to sometimes I could go into tourist mode because, you know, B-roll when Ken is just shooting like a really great street scene, I can actually kind of look around and start thinking of other things and taking my own photos and stuff like that. So that was fun.
How was the GSL studios as a whole, like, how did it, because to me, when I look at it, and I'm asking this just because for my own interest, but when I watch the GSL, there's always like it looks cool, but you can also see like that layer of almost kind of like it was thrown together, certain parts of the studio. Is it really good? Is it really high end? Is it?
For what I'm used to, it was very nice. I'm not necessarily the person that's been to like the sleek TV studios in New York or LA. So it reminded me a lot of the kind of things that we do here in DC.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely didn't feel, I don't know, like it felt pretty well put together. I didn't get to see their control room, which is actually, for me, the biggest thing, to be able to see like how good people are and what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw it for like a brief second when the door opened at one point. but yeah, I mean, the thing that struck me as really amusing, though, is that they would go and, like, the chairs would be put out at the beginning of the matches, and then by the end of the first set, they would have, like, people standing, and people would be sort of, there's just a stack of chairs in the corner, so when you came in, if there wasn't an empty chair, you could grab one. And so in between the first and the second matches, they would always have to, like, rearrange all the chairs and push people forward to make more room. And, every time I thought, like, why didn't you just set up more chairs in the first place? So, but I think it was a good thing, though, that, every single day they were filling to capacity and having to put out more chairs. So, especially when Idra was playing, I mean, that was a packed house, so you pretty much couldn't get through the people. So
there's always a lot of people when you have the foreigners, it seems like. So, on that, I have a question quickly about the GUM team. One last thing. When you're in the audience, do you hear any of the commentators?
You can hear the Korean commentators. And so that's actually playing, like, loudly, like you would expect from like an MLG or something like that. Being able to hear Day 9 and DJ Wheat in the crowd at an MLG, it's the same, but it's in Korean. But I would actually sit, because I was always trying to stay out of the shot, just in case, Ken turned around to get the audience or something like that. I always made sure I was in like a far corner. So I would sit like way over in the corner near Tasteless and Artosis, and I could hear them sometimes. Which was really interesting for Ken, because he's not necessarily a StarCraft fan. Like, he knew a little bit about it going in, but not much. And then, like I said, he doesn't speak Korean, so he's just trying to listen to tone of voice to figure out if the match is going to be over soon and, like, what he should be shooting and all of that stuff. So that's an interesting experience for him. But yeah, you can hear the Korean commentators really well. But if you want to go and listen to Tasteless and Artosis, it's not that easy. You have to sit like right next to them. So
now, does the crowd? I've always wondered this too. Does the crowd get into it at all there? Because you never see it much.
Yeah, a little bit. It's definitely, like, when everybody says that the MLG crowds are like more loud and more energetic, it's definitely true. The American audiences are a lot more, like, yelling and screaming and all of that stuff. But I mean, the crowd, like, they're still into it. Like, I think that it's just maybe a more reserved culture in general. And so maybe that's just not one of those things, like, Americans, like, we go nuts and scream for pretty much anything. So, so I think that that's just the difference. But yeah, it's, you could definitely tell when there were a lot of foreigners in the audience, because it did get a little bit louder and there were, more signs and stuff like that. So,
did you get to make your own cheerful?
I was going to, and then I just got so distracted with, like, trying to make sure that we got a good shot and all of that stuff that I didn't end up doing it. So, I also couldn't come up with, like, something funny to say that hadn't been done before. My creativity was shot at that moment, I guess.
No, it happens. Okay, so sorry, we kind of went on the GSL tangent there.
Yeah, well, that's
as far as we know, so back to talking about EG and talking about your project. There's a few players that are no longer with the team. How was that for you? Trying, like, how do you frame that in the movie? Was it hard to see them go?
It was hard to see them go because they are really great guys. I mean, there's nobody on the team that I didn't enjoy spending time with. And, you know, everybody talks about how Axelov is super nice and everything in person, and he really is. And Stripe Crow is as funny as everybody says. So, you know, that's a little sad for me, but they both they're still in the esports world. You know, Axelov's been signed with Rain.
Yep.
And suddenly I've forgotten which team Stripe Crow is coaching for. But so it ends up being kind of an epilogue in the film. Like, it is something definitely that we're going to touch on, because the idea of the story is this is a year in the life of a sports team.
FYI, Strife Crow is with Legion.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah. So, yeah, it's a year in the life of a sports team. So if we were covering, like, say, the Redskins or something like that, at the end of the year, we would talk about, you know, who they may have let off their contract and who might be going to other teams. And that it is part of the story. It is part of how a sports team functions, is sometimes you have players that don't stay on and whose contracts aren't renewed. So it is definitely something we'll be touching on. We're still figuring out exactly how we're going to do it, though.
Have you thought about how much the film itself is going to talk about, let's say, the business side, on how much of, like, the players or personal stories?
I'm very interested in the business side of it, partially because I'm in an industry that is, I think, similar in that everybody's trying to figure out how to pay their mortgage off of what they love. So that's something that just interests me a lot personally, so I think that is going to come into it a lot. You know, I've written out an outline of how things are going to go, but the trick is, like, what Bonnie told me when we started sitting down to make the schedule for the post-production of the film, is that we're going to make a rough cut, and then we're going to make a fine cut, and then we're going to decide we hate everything, and we're going to start over and scrap the entire thing, and we're going to make a new rough cut, and then we're going to finish the film. So the thing is that it's so hard to say what's actually going to be in it. I know that a lot of my focus has been on the business side of things, but obviously these players are such interesting people who have led such interesting lives that's going to come into it too. And of course the best documentaries are character-driven anyway, so
Sure.
that's always on our mind. So,
So do you have ideas for the future, post Good Game? Your follow-up projects? Any ideas? Anything in the works?
I do have some ideas. They're all so, like, in the very beginnings of things that I don't even necessarily, like, know where to even go with them yet. I mean, I did contact a friend of mine to actually, like, start working with me on, like, sort of associate producer kind of stuff on a documentary I want to make next. But the thing with documentaries is that they can fall apart so quickly. So, you know, if all goes according to plan, I actually have a documentary that I want to work on next. The trick would be that I am not going to go ahead with the same financial plan that I did this time. So it's actually going to take a little longer to put the next one together. And then I have a few ideas for narrative projects. I mean, the thing is, I've been focusing on documentary a lot lately, but I am still actually a narrative filmmaker as well. So, which... Actually, all film is narrative, so I have a professor that gets really mad when you say that. So fiction film, we'll say fiction.
Sure.
So I have a couple ideas for fiction projects that I would love to work on and film, but, you know, I don't necessarily know what... It'll sort of depend on... I guess the thing is, it'll depend on what gets funding first, is what I'll do next, which I think is a lot of how most people that do what I do actually figure things out, so...
Yep. That sounds about right. If you ever read any, even some of the bigger names, you know, in the industry, someone like a Robert Rodriguez, right? He's fully independent, but you hear about him starting projects and then constantly just ditching them for whatever else gets funding at the time or whatever else someone wants to pay for at the moment.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that's how Hollywood functions, is that, you know, it's whatever people will give you the money to do is what you're going to do next. And there are some passion projects, and there are people that will do things like this project, largely, like I've said before, has come out of my credit card with, you know, the Kickstarter funds obviously helped, and the donations have been a huge thing. But yeah, like this one I got started when I did because I just thought that I wanted to go ahead and do it. So I paid for it, paid for like the first 6 months. And that's not something I can necessarily do again. So
Do you see any possibility of any other kind of film or project coming from you revolving around pro gaming in the future?
there's definitely a possibility. It's always a chance. Everything that I'm interested in, like if I look at all of the documentary ideas that I've had and that I've, got in my scribbled notebook of stuff, they are all focused on subcultures and usually sort of a geeky, nerdy bent to things. Like, my previous work was a documentary about cosplayers. And so that's always going to be what I'm geared towards and what I'm interested in. So there are a couple stories that I've seen that have intrigued me. It's just a matter of, like I said, it would depend on something would have to grab me in a way that I like can't sleep at night because I want to think about it. Which is what happened with this one. I got back from MLGDC last year, or I guess it was the year before now. Time flies, and I would like want to get up and like scribble in a notebook like ideas for stories and how this is going to go and who I should follow, and I wanted to do research all night instead of actually sleeping, and you kind of have to have that kind of thing going into something like this. So it's definitely on my mind, and it's something that I would absolutely like. I will keep up with esports. I was a fan of StarCraft 2 beforehand, so I will keep watching the tournaments and going to them if I can, and all of that stuff. So if a story jumps up and grabs me, I would absolutely jump on it. So,
What? How about the other StarCraft 2 esports related film projects? Have you seen or heard much about them? Or any news from those? Like when you were in Korea, did you see where the Sons of StarCraft guy is still there?
It's actually funny because there were three of us there at the time. Sons of StarCraft, Jeff Alejos was there, and then Jonathan Sutak from Pro Gamer was also there. So we actually ended up, at least there was one night that we just went out, like all of us, and just went out on the town. And Jeff had obviously been there the longest, so he was teaching us how to order food and all that stuff that we didn't already know, and how to find good places to eat. So we actually did hang out with him quite a bit while we were in Korea. And then the guys from Star Nation we hung out with a lot in Providence. Yeah, it was Providence. Like suddenly all of the MLGs and the American events are running together. But yeah, so we've actually kept in touch with a lot of them, and we hang out, at least those four. And the guy, Michael Krukar, that's doing the Team Liquid documentary, like we've seen him quite a few times. Not as many, I think, because, he's off following Liquid and I'm off following EG, so we don't actually cross paths as much. But
you guys don't wrestle like Huck and Cheth?
No, like it's funny because I was joking around with Jonathan from Pro Gamer way back in the beginning about how like we needed to start a blog that was the adventures of three, because at the time it was only three. The adventures of three filmmakers trying to film the same story. And we were saying like that would only really work if sorry, there's an alarm going off over in the other room. So anyway, we were saying that it would only really work if we actually hated each other, or we like faked that we hated each other. So, and I'm going to go turn off that alarm, and I will be right back. Oh, never mind. It's somebody else.
Okay.
Because I was like, in a second, it's just going to keep getting louder, and then it's going to interrupt. But anyway.
Excuse me.
But yeah, so we've joked around about how we need to pretend to hate each other. But I'm not that type of person in general. Like it's so stressful to be super competitive with somebody and to be like hateful and everything. And it just, I have enough stress. Like,
yeah.
And we all have very different takes on the subject. So I think there's room in this world for all of us.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think there's definitely an audience for all of it as well. So, I mean, I know I'm looking forward to every single one. I'm like, dude, I just want to see more. It'll be fun. So, I think that's about all I had. Any other updates you want to talk about? Any other shout-outs? You got the floor.
I'm trying to think. I haven't talked about this yet, but we are going to be going to the IPL event at South by Southwest in Austin in March. We're going to be there for that. And that will probably be pretty much our wrap-up. We might have one other thing that we're shooting after that, and otherwise we're finally shutting down and saying, like putting away the camera and focusing on post, which is going to be so exciting. And yeah, I mean, I have to be super thankful for my crew, especially because they have pulled out all the stops and they're all, working really hard because they really believe that this film is going to be great. And the thing that's impressive about that for me is that, we've got people that have played StarCraft before, we've got people that might be fans, but for the most part, our crew has actually been people that aren't into esports. They might be into video games, but they didn't necessarily watch the competitive world. And they've come in and they think that this project is great and then they want to make it successful. And so I think that says something about how great esports is and how great this story is. And then I have to say, our donors are just amazing, astonishing, wonderful people. Because, when I was in Korea, I have to admit I was having a panic attack at one point about funding. And then, right then, somebody sent a donation and, just random, it was just, there's always that little bit of a picking up whenever somebody says something nice or supports the film or talks about it. And that's definitely kept me going in the dark days. So I love all the fans of the film and the people that have been supporting us. And we're so excited about post-production starting. We started getting some volunteer transcribers. They're going to be helping us out, getting all that stuff done, and, huge shout out to them. And we're going to hopefully start updating the website a little more regularly now that I'm not jaunting across the country on a moment's notice. And so we'll be keeping a little more info coming in through that and keeping up with that a little better than we have been. And yeah, I don't know. Things might go quiet a little bit, I might be posting pictures and things like that. There might not be as much video coming out in the next few months, but that's because we're making the full film rather than making a trailer. So it's exciting. I can't wait. I want to see this movie just as badly as everybody else does.
So go ahead and give us your website and your company and everything.
All right, it's 9 Hour Films, and the website for the film is goodgamemovie.com, and you can follow me on Twitter. It's at 9 Hour Films, and I usually will do a hashtag GGmovie whenever I talk about the movie. So if you ever want to ask me anything about it, just use that hashtag, and I will see it, and I will happily answer your questions and talk to you about the film. So.
All right. Well, I think that's about it. I think that'll about wrap it up. So,
all right, awesome. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no, I like to hear from you. Like to hear about the film. I've always been interested in the film industry. So I've always wanted to be one of those VCR filmmakers. Sit in my house and talk about Kurosawa films and.
That's how it starts.
Yep.
That's how you start getting into it, and then the next thing you know, you're in film school, and then you've maxed out all your credit cards. So.
Well, yeah, I know that's how Kevin Smith did it originally. So.
Yeah, you got to start with the love of movies, and then from there, you just all of a sudden you find out you're making your own, and it's kind of surreal in the beginning. So.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and cut out the call here, and then I'm gonna talk about a few other things on the show here. So, okay. All right, Mary, good to have you on. Hope you have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye. Let's cut that out. Bam. All right. Let's see. Let me just cut all this. Make sure XSplit isn't all confused here. So that was fun. Having Mary back on the show. She's always she's an entertaining guest, entertaining filmmaker. Excuse me. Yeah, so I've been sick. Hence the reason I have not been doing very much lately. My voice is still shot to hell. My cough is almost gone. and that's about where we're at. We're going to be changing some things format-wise. You can go to sc2newscast.com right now, of course, and check out the podcast, the normal blog and podcast, and everything else. And honestly, with everything going on, it's really been very hard for me to continue to update this because I work full-time and have, wife and kid, and this is just what I do on the side for fun. But I think I'm going to actually have to cut back some just due to timing. I mean, no other reason. I love doing it. But 5 days a week podcast plus actually 6 days a week, then this on the 6th day has been taking a lot out of me. And especially when I have something like get sick or whatever, it makes it near impossible to get everything done. So I think what we're going to do is going to try a slightly different format. Instead of a 5-day-a-week podcast, and then followed with a 6-day with the weekly edit, where we have guests and interviews and just me chatting, just talking about the week in StarCraft 2, I think we're going to change it. I'm going to try cutting out the normal 5-day-a-week podcast. And I think what we'll do is try to do, when we do a weekly edit, is we're going to start out with the first half of the show doing the week's news. And then do the second half of the show where we talk and chat it up and everything. It's just been... It's a lot of effort that... it's not that I'm not willing, it's taken a lot out of me. And especially it's been hard when, again, our work schedules change, everything changes, having family or whatever in the area, it's hard. So... I think that's what we're going to go with. I hope that's cool. I hope that works. We're going to try that out. Hopefully we can still get some viewers. I'm still randomly streaming games and whatnot. You can watch my very, very shitty Zerg play anytime you want. You can follow us. We're on Team Liquid. There's a thread. You can go to sc2newscast.com. You can, we have links on the side. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and Google Plus also. We got the Google Plus set up. And so wherever you want to follow us, go ahead and follow us, and I'll still randomly be posting, and I want to keep the project alive as a whole. It's just going to be hard to be doing it as much as I have been doing it. So I hope that's cool. I know we got some pretty constant viewers and listeners out there, so for them I apologize. I'm going to try to do what I can, and hopefully it'll work out. That's about all that I had. That and if you missed GSL last night, go back and watch the games from Code from last night, because there was an awesome mothership versus Broodlord battle that was pretty cool, pretty insane to watch. I can't even remember who it was playing right now. Let me look it up. But it was awesome. It was. No, that's not what I want. What are you doing? It was Code. It was in Code last night, right? Here it is. It was, I think it was Squirtle versus Seal, Game 1. Which was it was an awesome matchup. There were some good games last night overall. That's something else I was going to talk about quickly. I don't know if any of you guys feel this way. This is just kind of an opinion thing. I have a hard time watching other tournaments now that aren't GSL. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way or has the same point of view. I mean, it's awesome to watch MLG, right? With the crowd going wild. You got some Koreans, you got foreigners, everyone's battling. You got Naniwa ripping out Nestie's heart or whatever. You know, it was pretty cool. But you know what I have a hard time watching though is a lot of the tournaments, other tournaments that aren't MLG or GSL, because I feel like I've been jaded by watching the GSL. Like, even Code A sometimes is hard for me to watch compared to watching Code S. Just because you see, we're so, as spectators, trained watching these outstanding players, and now when we watch, you know, the next level down, the minor league almost, if you will, it's not the same. And you're like, yeah, that guy should be dead. Why is he not dead? Why? And you get to that point where it's hard to, at least for me, it's been hard to not get jaded at just the fact that you see mistakes. And I mean, I know I suck as a player. Don't worry. I'm not trying to say that. But it's kind of like when you see people constantly getting away with mistakes, it makes the game a little bit not as entertaining to watch, if that makes sense. I mean, like I always compare it to baseball because I'm a huge baseball fan, and I watch Major League Baseball every season. I am an SF Giants guy. You can't see, but right back up here, there's like collector's Giants balls and a World Series 2010 ball cubed, and I love baseball, but I can't stand hardly watching minor league baseball. It's fun, but you see errors, you see problems, and it's like, oh, come on, you guys. I don't even know if I want to watch this anymore. And that's kind of sometimes how I feel when watching other StarCraft matches. It's not that I don't want to watch StarCraft. It's that I want to watch Code-S, top of the line, the best play all the time. But I don't know. I'm not trying to say that that's a good thing. It's not necessarily, and it's not all the time. It's just sometimes I get in that mood and I'm like, God, these Code A games just they're shit. I don't want to watch this crap, you know? Excuse me. But there's other days where I'm all into it. It doesn't matter what's playing. I don't know. I don't know if any of you guys have had that point of view. If you do, go ahead and we'll talk about it. You can talk about it on our Team Liquid thread, through our chat, through whatever else. So I'm just curious because I know I get that way. But I think that's pretty much going to wrap us up for today. I just kind of remembered that I wanted to mention that when I had time. So be sure to, like I said, go ahead, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. There's everything. Just type in SC2 Newscast into Google, and you're going to find pretty much everything about us. So thanks again for checking it out. I want to thank Mary Ratliff. Go to goodgamemovie.com. Check out the teasers, the images that they've released so far. I'm really excited for the film. I'm excited for the Liquid film. I'm excited for the Star Nation film. I want to see what everyone can put together. So hopefully everyone gives support to those films, and well, that's about all I got. Thank you guys for checking us out, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.